So on my last video, I mentioned that my 100th video would tackle a huge genre. Well, unfortunately, I woke up on March 8th and found out that the legendary Akira Toriyama had passed away on March 1st of 2024, just a couple days ago. And that was a punch to the gut. And for a couple of seconds when I saw that, I thought it was just a tasteless rumor, making the circles on the internet like sometimes they do. And unfortunately, it was not. So I'm not going to BS here and tell you that I was a huge fan of Toriyama-san from the very beginning and that I followed him throughout all of his artistic years, because I didn't. I saw his artwork for the first time in a copy of EGM magazine when it was previewing Chrono Trigger. Now, I was already a big fan of RPGs, but something caught my eye with this one. The characters and the overall visual style stood out to me. It was very distinct. And at the time I had no idea that he was behind this artwork. The game was amazing, but I was really sucked into it and fell in love with the characters of this legendary RPG. None of them have speaking roles, obviously, and all their interactions and feedback in the game are via text and sprite pantomime. But they are expressive and get to the point. And I'm not gonna go over the full game here because that's not the point of this video. I was obsessed with the characters and all the drawings that I found made by Toriyama-san. The attention to details, the layouts, the character facial expressions, all gave his drawings a life of their own. And I loved that. So when I saw the Dragon Quest VII cover on PS1, I immediately recognized that style. I was like, yeah, wait a minute, I know this. This is from Chrono Trigger. Could this be the same artist? It was then that I researched further and found out his name. Akira Toriyama. He was named after one of my favorite animated movies ever. And he was responsible for the character designs in Chrono Trigger, my favorite RPG and possibly favorite game of all time. During the mid to late 90s, Dragon Ball has still not made that impact it would ultimately make in the 2000s, so I knew him by his work in the Dragon Quest games for the most part, which by then were synonymous with one another, and for a few years I was a bit obsessed with Chrono Trigger, buying it on the Super Nintendo and then the PS1, and doing some artwork based on it on my own. Suddenly, I had fully animated cutscenes of these characters, and I fell in love with the game even further. Then in the early 2000s, Cartoon Network began airing Dragon Ball the series, followed by Dragon Ball Z, during their Toonami programming block. Anybody remember that? Yeah, I was hooked. And I'm sure a lot of kids out there were. I remember getting home every day from work and watching each episode, enthralled as to what would happen next in Goku's adventures. That is when I feel Dragon Ball really took off here in the States. Then I came to find out this series had been around since 1986, with the manga being created by Toriyama-san in 1984. A manga that spanned 519 chapters from that year to 1995. His Dragon Ball manga and animated series based on it would help popularize the whole Japanese comic-like scene to Western audiences in those early days of the 2000s, kicking off a wave of animated series and manga runs on many genres that has only exploded since then into the massive industry that it is today. But Akira Toriyama should not be remembered only for the creation of Dragon Ball, but for the impact his creations in the manga and video game scenes would have and how they would reverberate throughout the world. He is so much more than that. There are tons of manga comics and games out there, RPGs and so forth, and it's the characters in those games, in those mediums, that make these things timeless. They are the reason why we fall in love with such stories and such games. And luckily for all of us, he created some of the most memorable ones in both mediums. 68 years old. Way too soon, especially nowadays. And according to sources online, he was working on several projects when he passed. He clearly had so much more to offer. So, wherever you are, thank you Akira Toriyama for sharing with us all your amazing gifts and talent. Rest in peace, you are a legend.